In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use the stereo camera rig that comes with Houdini. So to get going, please open up the starting support file, which is called start.hip. And in here, you should see a scientist character tipping over a beaker of liquid. Now, bear in mind that there is no animation or simulation on the scene. It's just a single export mesh of a single frame of the character here. So basically we just have a static mesh that represents the character and the beaker tipping over. Now that said, it's interesting to note that the lighting and rendering information in the scene has actually been baked into the textures of the character, and these have been applied to the character via different materials, which is why we can see them right here in the viewport. So now if we want to get the stereo camera into our scene, we have a couple of options. In other applications where there is no stereo camera rig, you can actually build one of your own. But the cool thing about using Houdini's stereo camera rig is we can actually preview the stereoscopic effect without doing any crazy workarounds or hacks. So to introduce the stereo camera rig, just go to your lights and camera shelf and then simply click on the stereo camera button to drop one in. Just like with the camera button, you can actually control left click this particular button to drop a stereo camera rig in based on the current view that we have. Now, initially it won't be able to see the scene properly, but that can be easily fixed by simply framing in on a bunch of objects. So to do that, just go ahead and lock the stereo camera rig to the navigation view. Now that it's been locked here, simply select any object in your scene and frame it. So I'll just select my scene net box, which will select all my objects that are inside of it, like that. And now with my scene net box selected, I'll move my mouse over to the view and press space G on the keyboard to frame in all my objects. Now the neat thing is it's going to frame the outside of the room, but we can simply move on a little bit closer like that, and you can tell that there's something kind of off here. It looks like we're seeing doubles, or our image is slightly blurred and there's some red and blue, some funkiness going on. Well, as you probably guessed, this is actually the anaglyphic display preview mode turned on, and this is only activated with the help of the stereo camera rig. If you were to select any of the other cameras that are actually located in the stereo camera rig, these don't have this anaglyphic mode activated in them. So once you have your stereo camera rig selected here, you'll be able to trigger the anaglyphic preview mode. You also have the option of changing this stereo display mode. Just tap the D key on the keyboard to pull up the display options, go to the viewport, and here you can change your stereo display mode from anaglyph to maybe something like horizontal interlace, like so. So you have those options as well. I'll take it back to anaglyph and close this off. So that's the great thing about working with the stereo camera rig. You can easily preview your stereoscopic results without having to render and composite them to see what your final result looks like. You can actually take your cyan or your red cyan or your anaglyphic glasses and put them on and see the full stereo effect here. And the neat thing is you can actually preview it and check out the display results by simply altering some parameters in the stereo cam rig. So if you want, put on your 3D glasses now. You can basically procure or buy these 3D glasses online, or you can get them at special novelty stores. Comic book shops tend to sell them, and you can also sometimes find them on DVD or Blu-ray releases that have that are 3D movies that come with maybe 3 to 4 pairs of them. So that's basically how it works. Now go ahead and grab those, put them on, and simply go to your stereo cam rig stereo tab if you want to check out the parameters that are related to the stereo cam rig here. Really, the first two are the most important ones. We have the zero parallax setting and the interaxial distance. The zero parallax setting basically determines what part of your object is going to be in focus or has no depth effect on it. It basically depicts, or it represents, the areas that have maximum overlap. Areas with maximum overlap are zero parallax areas with no depth effect on them. And usually you can actually preview or get a good idea of what your 3D is going to look like without even having your glasses on by simply looking at the amount of overlap on your objects in the scene here. Now, besides the zero parallax setting, we also have the interaxial distance, which is basically the distance between your left camera and your right camera over here. So we have the left camera and right camera, and the distance in between them is determined by the interaxial distance. You can actually preview this interaxial distance by looking at your stereo cam rig camera. So if you want to do this, simply toggle over to your native viewport camera and then home in on your stereo cam rig here. So with the stereo cam rig selected, press space G And maybe pull back a little bit. So here we have the two cameras, and by simply changing the interaxial distance, you can pull the camera apart. Greater interaxial distance gets you a more pronounced stereoscopic effect, while smaller values reduce the depth effect on them. A value of 0 means you'll have no stereo because your eyes are going to be right over one another. We also have the left and right interaxial distance, which are good offset parameters to work with, as well as a bunch of interesting display previews, display options here. You can actually show these interaxial controls that you can tweak, like so. You can also show the zero parallax setting marker and some of the other screen settings here. So this is just a very nice way of telling you where that zero parallax point is going to be based on the setting that you have. So these are some useful tools to work with. And finally, we actually have the ability to view the viewing planes or the frustum of our camera here. So we have none, which is the default. You can look at the center, left, what the left camera is looking at, what the right camera is looking at, what they're both looking at simultaneously, and the intersection of the two. So we have those options. Now we're going to take a break at this point, and in the next lesson we're going to take a closer look at the zero parallax setting and the interaxial distance so we can understand them a bit better before we start tweaking them to get a good stereo result in our scene here.